it seems like everywhere you turn these days, you bump into this idea of people moving around the globe,
Yeah.
migrating between countries. And I think for a lot of us,
Right.
it's this constant thing.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to make sense of the world,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the U.S. Because whether you're looking at the economy or, you're reading about people chasing their dream careers or just understanding global trends,
Yeah.
immigration is such a huge part of all of that.
Right.
But honestly, I think for a lot of people, myself included,
Uh-huh.
just wrapping your head around all the different ways people come to live and work in the U.S.,
Totally.
it's so complicated.
Yeah.
Like, where do you even begin?
Exactly.
It can feel like untangling this massive knot.
I know what you mean.
So that's what we're doing in this deep dive.
Okay.
We're going to try to make sense of it all.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to really dig into the different types of U.S. visas, because I think if we can get a clearer picture of the different pathways people take to come here, it can really help us understand all these bigger issues that are so interconnected with immigration.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why we've pulled together all this information for you.
Right.
Outlining those main avenues that people can use to legally enter the U.S.
Right.
And what we really want to do today is go beyond just listing a bunch of visa names.
Yeah.
We want to actually help you understand what they're all about, what purposes they serve.
You're right. It's about making it all make sense, not just throwing a bunch of acronyms and jargon around.
Exactly. So we'll be covering the whole spectrum.
Okay.
From visas for short-term trips, like if you're just coming to study for a semester or take a vacation, all the way to options that could potentially lead to permanent residency, if you're thinking about putting down roots here.
I like it. It's like your shortcut to understanding U.S. immigration.
Exactly.
So I'm excited to dive in. But looking at this list of visa types, it's a lot. I mean, we've got visas for students wanting to learn in the U.S., tourists, workers, families hoping to reunite, investors looking to, start businesses and create jobs, and even visas for really, really specific situations.
Yeah.
Like, I'm already feeling a little overwhelmed just thinking about it.
Well, that's why we're here, to break it down and make it all more digestible.
I appreciate that. So where should we start?
Well, why don't we start with education?
Okay.
That's often the first step for a lot of people who end up in the U.S.
Right. Makes sense.
So if you're dreaming of hitting the books and, studying in America, the F1 visa is the one to know.
Okay. F1.
Got it. This visa is specifically for international students who've enrolled in, a recognized educational program.
Or college.
Exactly. It could be university degree, college courses, or even certain accredited high school programs.
Okay. So it covers the whole range of formal education.
Yeah, it's the foundation for anyone wanting to pursue their studies here in the U.S.
Got it. So F1 is for the traditional student working towards their degree. But what about someone who's coming for a shorter period, maybe not for a full-on degree, but for like a cultural exchange or a research project?
Oh, interesting.
What visa would they need?
Well, that's where the J1 comes in.
J1.
And this one's really fascinating because it covers all these different types of programs.
Oh.
Programs designed to promote cultural and educational exchange.
I see.
So you're right. It's not just for students in traditional degree programs. It could be for researchers and scholars or people participating in exchange programs, like au pair arrangements or summer work travel experiences.
Interesting.
Even some government-sponsored visitor programs fall under this category.
Wow. So it's all about encouraging these international connections and sharing of ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about fostering that two-way flow of cultural understanding.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So to summarize, it sounds like the F1 is more for structured academic programs.
Right.
And the J1 is broader.
Yeah.
With a focus on exchange and research. Okay. Now, let's say someone just wants to visit the U.S.
Okay.
No studying, no working, just a simple visit.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to see the sights, take a vacation, or perhaps they need medical treatment.
Right.
What visa would apply in those cases?
In those cases, you'd be looking at the B2 visa.
B2. Got it.
This is your classic visitor visa for tourism. It lets you travel around the U.S. for leisure.
Right.
And it also covers those visits for medical reasons.
I see.
So if someone needs to come here for healthcare, the B2 would cover them.
Makes sense. So B2 is for personal trips and medical needs.
Right.
But what if the visit is for business?
Okay.
Like if someone needs to attend meetings, go to a conference, or, negotiate a business deal.
Right, right.
Is there a separate visa for that?
Absolutely. That would be the B1 visa.
One, okay.
And it's exactly. And also things like participating in short-term training programs.
Okay. But this visa doesn't allow them to actually work for a U.S. company, right?
No, that's a really important distinction.
Okay.
The B1 is strictly for conducting business, not taking up employment.
Got it.
So if someone's planning to work here, they'd need a different type of visa altogether.
Right, which I'm guessing we'll be getting to soon.
We will.
So just to recap, B2 is for personal travel and medical care.
Right.
And B1 is for those business-related trips.
Yes.
Where you're not actually being employed by a U.S. entity.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's shift gears and talk about working in the U.S.
All right.
Because I know this is a big one for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And there seem to be so many different visa options for work.
Yeah, there are quite a few.
So let's start with the one we hear about all the time, the H1B.
Okay, the H1B, this is a major one.
It is.
So the H1B visa is specifically for skilled professionals in specialized occupations. These are usually jobs that require at least a bachelor's degree or something equivalent.
Got it.
Think of fields like engineering, computer science, medicine, finance.
Right, specialized areas.
Exactly. Areas where there's a demand for highly qualified individuals, people with specific expertise.
So it's not just any job.
Right. And actually, there's something really interesting about the H1B. There are often way more people who want these visas than there are visas available.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so they actually use a lottery system to decide who gets them.
A lottery? That seems kind of random.
It is. So even if you're perfectly qualified, it still comes down to luck sometimes.
That's crazy. So it's not just about having the skills and the qualifications.
Nope, you need a bit of luck on your side, too.
Wow. Okay, so that's the H-1B. What about more temporary work situations?
Okay.
I know there are visas specifically for agricultural work and then others for non-agricultural temporary jobs.
You're right.
Let's talk about those.
Okay, so for temporary agricultural work, we have the H2A Visa. And this one lets U.S. agricultural employers, farms and such, who are expecting a shortage of domestic workers to bring foreign nationals to the U.S. to help out.
I see.
But there are specific requirements the employers have to meet. To prove that they really need these workers.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then for temporary jobs that aren't related to agriculture, there's the H2B Visa.
H2B, got it.
This one covers those temporary or seasonal non-agricultural jobs.
Okay.
So think of industries like hospitality, tourism, construction, those kinds of jobs that have those peak seasons where they need extra help.
Right, like holiday seasons or big construction projects.
Exactly.
Okay, so H2A is for farms. H2B is for other seasonal or temporary needs.
You got it.
Now, what if someone already works for a big international company and their employer wants to transfer them to a U.S. branch or office?
Right.
Is there a visa specifically for that kind of internal transfer?
Yes, there is. It's called the L1 visa.
L1, okay.
And it's specifically designed for employees of multinational companies who are being transferred to a different part of the company in the U.S.
I see.
So it could be a parent company, a subsidiary, an affiliate, a branch office.
So it's about facilitating those transfers within the same organization.
Exactly.
Makes sense. So it allows companies to move their key personnel around.
Right. Especially those managerial, executive, or specialized knowledge employees.
Okay. So we've covered visas for students, visitors, and a whole bunch of work-related visas.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
Now let's move on to family-based immigration.
All right.
Because this is a big one, too.
It is.
What are the main visas for people who want to come to the U.S. to be with family members?
Okay, so let's say someone is engaged to a U.S. citizen, and they want to come here to get married.
Right.
In that case, they would need a K-1 visa.
K-1, so this is like the fiancé visa.
Exactly. It allows them to come to the U.S. with the purpose of getting married.
Okay.
But they have to get married within 90 days of arriving.
90 days? That's a pretty tight deadline.
It is, but once they're married, they can apply to adjust their status and become a permanent resident.
Oh, okay. So K-1 gets them in the door, and then marriage paves the way to permanent residence.
Exactly, but what if someone is already married to a U.S. citizen?
Right, and they're living outside the U.S.
Right.
What happens then?
Well, in that case, they wouldn't need a K-1.
Makes sense.
They would usually apply for an immigrant visa, like the IR-1 or the CR-1.
IR-1, CR-1. Those are new ones.
They are. These are specifically for spouses of U.S. citizens.
Okay.
And the cool thing about these visas is that they can lead directly to permanent resident status.
So no need to adjust status after arriving.
Exactly. Though there is a slight difference between the IR1 and the CR1.
Oh.
It often depends on how long the couple has been married when the visa is approved.
I see.
The CR1 actually comes with a conditional status for the first 2 years.
So after 2 years, if the marriage is still going strong, they get full permanent residency. That makes sense. So to clarify, the K1 is for couples who are planning to marry a U.S. citizen.
Right.
And the IR1 and CR1 are for couples who are already married.
Exactly.
And both those visa paths can lead to permanent residency.
That's right.
Okay, now let's talk about investment and business visas.
Okay.
I know a lot of people are curious about these.
Yeah, they can be quite complex.
They can. So what options are out there for people who want to invest money in the U.S. economy?
So there are a couple of big ones.
Okay.
One is the E2 visa.
E2, all right.
This one's for people from countries that have a specific treaty with the U.S.
Treaty.
Yeah, a treaty of commerce and navigation.
Okay.
And to qualify for the E2, these individuals have to be coming to the U.S. to develop and manage a business.
Okay.
A business that they've invested a significant amount of capital in.
I see.
And that investment has to create jobs for U.S. workers.
So it's not just about putting money into the economy.
Right.
It's also about job creation. Got it. Now, the other big investment visa we hear a lot about is the EB-5.
Ah, yes, the EB-5.
This one seems really popular, but also really complicated.
It can be.
Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So the EB-5 is for people who make a qualifying investment in a new commercial enterprise in the U.S.
Okay.
And a really key part of this visa is that it requires the creation of at least 10 full-time jobs for U.S. workers.
10 jobs, that's a lot.
It is. And the minimum investment amount is currently $1.05 million.
Wow, that's a serious investment.
It is. But there's a little caveat.
Oh.
That amount is reduced to $800,000 if the investment is made in a targeted employment area.
The targeted employment area.
Yeah, it's often called a TEA.
Okay, TEA.
And it's usually a rural area or an area with high unemployment.
So they incentivize investment in those areas by lowering the investment threshold.
Exactly. Now, the really appealing thing about the EB-5 is that it can lead to permanent residency.
Oh, wow.
Both for the investor and their immediate family.
So it's a big commitment, but with a big potential reward. Okay, so to summarize, the E2 is for investors from treaty countries who are creating jobs.
Right.
And the EB-5 is for those making a substantial investment and creating at least 10 jobs.
You got it.
Okay, we've covered a ton of visa types already.
We have.
But there are a few more specialized categories we should touch on.
Right.
You know, visas for specific, unique situations.
Exactly.
So, what are some of those?
Okay, well, there's the D visa.
D visa, okay.
This one's specifically for crew members working on those big commercial sea vessels or aircraft that operate in the U.S.
So it's a very specific type of worker.
Very specific.
Okay. What about the U visa?
The U visa. This one is really important.
Okay.
It's meant to protect vulnerable individuals.
Oh, how so?
Well, it provides immigration protection to people who have been victims of certain serious crime.
Oh, wow.
And who've experienced substantial physical or mental abuse because of those crimes.
That's terrible.
It is. And a key requirement for this visa is that the victims have to be willing to help law enforcement.
I see.
You know, with the investigation or prosecution of the criminal activity.
So it encourages them to come forward without fear of being deported.
Exactly. It's about protecting them and ensuring justice can be served.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then there's the T visa, right?
That's right.
That one's for victims of human trafficking, isn't it?
It is.
Another really important protection.
Absolutely. The T visa offers protection and a path to legal status for those who've been subjected to these horrific crimes.
Right.
And similar to the U visa, it usually requires cooperation with law enforcement.
So both the U and the T visas are really about protecting victims and bringing perpetrators to justice.
Exactly.
While also offering a chance for those victims to rebuild their lives in a safe environment.
That's right.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different visa categories.
We have.
But there's one more we should touch on.
Okay.
Refugee and asylum status.
Right.
Now, these aren't technically visas, are they?
You're right. They're a little different.
Okay, so how do they work?
So with refugee and asylum status, you're not applying for a visa from outside the U.S. to come here.
I see.
It's more about seeking protection once you're already here.
Or at the border Right.
Exactly. So refugee status is usually granted to people who are applying from outside the U.S.,
Hmm.
while asylum is for individuals who are already in the U.S. or who are at a U.S. port of entry.
Okay.
But in both cases, the individual has to prove that they have a well-founded fear of persecution.
So they have to demonstrate that they're in danger in their home country.
Exactly. And that persecution has to be based on things like their race, religion, nationality, political opinion.
Or their membership in a particular social group.
Right.
It's a high bar to clear.
It is, but it's a vital protection for those facing real threats.
Absolutely. So after going through all of this, it really hits home how complex the U.S. immigration system is.
It is. There's so much to it.
We've got people coming to study, people coming to work and contribute to the economy,
Uh-huh.
families reuniting, people fleeing danger.
It's a whole spectrum of human experience.
It is.
And I think what's fascinating is how each visa category reflects a different need or priority for the United States.
Right.
You know, from supporting academic exchange and driving economic growth to offering humanitarian aid.
It's all interconnected.
It is.
Okay, so let's say someone is listening to this
Uh-huh.
and they're thinking about their own situation.
Okay.
Or maybe they know someone who's considering coming to the U.S.
Right.
What's the first thing they should do to figure out which of these paths might be relevant to them?
The absolute first step is to figure out why they want to come to the U.S.
Their purpose.
Exactly.
Right.
Are they coming to study? Do they have a job offer? Are they trying to be with family?
Right.
Or are they planning to make a big investment?
So pinpointing that core objective is crucial.
It is. Because once you know the why, you can start figuring out the how.
That makes a lot of sense. Because like we've seen, there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
It all depends on the individual situation and their goals. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
I agree.
I feel like I finally have a grasp on the different ways people can come to the U.S.
Yeah, and I think when you take a step back and look at the bigger picture,
Uh-huh.
it's amazing to see how these visa categories contribute to the diversity of the U.S.
Right.
You know, all these different cultures and skills and perspectives.
That's what makes the U.S. what it is.
Exactly. And each category represents an opportunity for someone to bring their talents here and contribute to the fabric of the nation.
That's beautifully put.
Yeah.
So, as you're thinking about all of this information, I want to leave you with a question.
Okay.
When you think about global movement and the pursuit of opportunity, which of these pathways that we've discussed piques your interest the most?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe think about the people you know or the news you follow.
Mm-hmm.
Which of these categories might help you understand their stories a little better?
I like that.
And as you ponder those questions, I encourage you to keep exploring the fascinating and often complex world of U.S. immigration.
It's definitely worth exploring.